in person and online. My name is Florence Chi, and I serve as director of the Center for Digital Ethics and Policy at Loyola University, Chicago, and the School of Communication as Associate Professor of Digital Communication. It's my utmost pleasure to welcome you to our 12th Annual International Symposium, the first with a primarily in-person component since 2019. On a personal level, 2023 marks my 10th year of service at Loyola University, Chicago. Back in 2013, when I first started as an assistant professor in the School of Communication, I'd see Sister Jean around the campuses, just as I was also running around in my rookie year, always up for a conversation. She has spoken kindly of SimLab as a space for engagement with technology at Convocation back when I first founded the lab, and Sister Jean had gotten the honorary doctorate. So it is Dr. Sister Jean. And she's always served as a role model. I've been a fan since the very beginning for being digitally savvy and connected while never forgetting where the work is. So I am beyond ecstatic that Sister Jean has agreed to come join us for this fireside chat. And the rationale being that we have this lovely venue, Bean Hall at the Water Tower campus at Loyola Chicago. And we're making the most of the fireplace with the fireside chat on this symposium day. It's a wonderful opportunity to have this intimate chat with Sister Jean in a conversation about technology, maybe basketball, but technology for today. And where she sees technology going. With the Digital Ethics Symposium theme of inflection points, Sister Jean's perspective would lend a social, historical, and spiritual perspective that embraces the heart and the mission of Loyola University Chicago. And that's why I love capping this event off with such a long memory, long perspective. And please help me in warmly welcoming Sister Jean.
Thank you so much, Dr. Chi. If for one moment you can't hear my voice, just raise your hand. That's the teacher in me that's saying, I don't want you to miss one word of what I have to say. And right now, before I even begin to answer Dr. Chi's question, I want you to know that when I talk to the freshman parents and the freshmen themselves during orientation, and that's about 12 different sessions that we have, I always tell them a story. And I always have to start out with once upon a time, because I don't think that's ever going to go away from any story. I hope it doesn't. This, however, was not once upon a time. It was just about 2 years ago. And a young woman who has now graduated from Loyola came to me and said, Sister Jean, I'm a student in the School of Communication, and my assignment is to talk to somebody older to find out what you learned from communication and how it's changed over the years. And I said to her, well, how long do you think that will take us? She said, oh, about 15 minutes. I said, 15 minutes. I said, if I gave you 1 minute for every year of my life, we would be late for dinner. I said, we better do this for 1 hour and then we'll be safe. So much in my life has changed. Much in yours has changed even more in a shorter span of time. But when I think of communications, I have to go back to when I started to read, which was probably 1925, when I was in first grade. And my dad used to open the newspaper for me too, and asked me to pick out words that I knew. But when it came to my primer, which is what we called our little book, I did a very unusual thing. I memorized my story. So when I got up to read, and in those days we didn't have reading groups, when I got up to read, just to be a fun person with my classmates, I would hold my book upside down and I would just go ahead and read. My teacher never caught on. My teacher never moved out of her desk. I thought she was probably 100 years old. She was probably 30, you know, and I was just giving her too many years on life. But when my mom asked me to read at night to them what I was supposed to be learning for the next day, my dad noticed that my eyes were not looking at my book. And so he would point out words to me, and I'd have to go all the way through to find that. So he helped me learn how to read. And even the newspaper I was handling that very early. And the newspaper was where we got our news, or from the radio. That has changed over the years. I'm not going to do the development because you know the development better than I do. We got the serious news when the call bulletin young man used to run up and down the street and say, extra, extra, all about it. And my dad would give us 2 pennies to go out and buy the newspaper in San Francisco and find out what was happening. I was very conscious of the fact that I was learning a lot of stuff that I didn't learn in school. And that was really political science, learning about people my dad and mom voted for. They were very conscious of keeping us updated in what we were supposed to be learning. Newspapers, radios, from little ham sets to what we have today. And the radio, poor little radio, is kind of put behind a little bit, except in some sports, you still listen to it on the radio. Telephone, whoever thought of a little thing that would fit in your pocket? Pretty soon, the little chip will be put in a child's wrist, they say, when the child is born, and have his own telephone. A telephone number will be social security number, all that kind of thing. It really frightens me sometimes when I hear what things are happening out there. I appreciate change. I'm willing to do change. I don't think I'm as good at all this digital as Dr. Chi mentioned, but I'm willing to try and willing to learn. The things I like, of course, are computers. I like, I have to say, I like WordPerfect better than I like any kind of information that the IT gives us now. I don't like the changes that come and help fill out my sentence. And I know you know what I talk about. I don't write my letters all the same way. So I don't need that extra thing that says, you know, it fills out the sentence. There are certain things that have been really wonderful in the change, but I get concerned when we talk about the ethical part. I wonder how many people actually think about it, or how they just lift even more than they did when we had books. That AI scares me. And I think somebody like you people who have so much experience should begin to tackle it right now and find out how it can work to our advantage rather than to our disadvantage. They talk about now AI as having a chat section, so that all the student has to do is say into its computer, I would like you to write a term paper for me that talks about the development of digital information. And it'll whip out into the printer just exactly what the student needs. I ask myself, how are faculty going to determine whether that's really the student's work or the AI's work? That's just a simple example. I think you have a great responsibility when you get all those papers to make the determination. It was hard enough when it was book to paper. It's hard enough now when it's from Google to paper. I think to myself, the faculty have that responsibility to teach students ethical procedure in every class that's available, not just communications people, not just English teachers. Every faculty has that responsibility. And I think you have to accept it because everything is just going like lightning. And it's probably going to increase doubly as it goes along. It amazes me how, and if I'm going too far away, just tell me to stop.
You're bang on.
It amazes me how when you ride the bus or if you're on the L train and a mom has a little 2.5-year-old with her, here he or she is using the telephone already. And you have your own children, your own grandchildren that you're depending on to help you sometimes with your computer. That's what I do in Damon. When my computer isn't working on my iPad, I just go out and say to some young man or some young woman, do you think you could get my phone to stop going to voicemail all the time? And all they do is just hit a couple of buttons that I'd be afraid to hit, and then they get it all settled for me. Or can you tell me why my screen is getting smaller all the time? It's amazing how much they know, and they learn from each other as well as from their classes. Digital information should be to our benefit, not to our defeat or not to our feeling uncomfortable. There's some digital that totally out of line, TikTok for one, and evidently there's room for them to be taking that off the market soon. So if we don't get the right responses, then we need to protest against them. Now, I don't mean stand on the corners. I mean, do it in a professional way. So right off now, that's the way I feel.
Okay. Sister Jean, you answered a lot of the preparatory questions that I had already had, but to build upon that, what changes do you find most notable about how we use communication technology at the university?
Well, for a long time, I thought we were failing in communications as a university and as a society. And that's when I see young men and women crossing the street and using their telephones, I think, well, we'll lose a few more students and something will happen. But they can't be without those telephones now. And I guess the rest of us can't be without them either. And we always hear, well, they have them because they need protection. We have to have them because we need to know where they are and what they're doing. And those things are all valid and all true. But when it becomes an obsession with them, they're just outside their classroom and they're into their phone right away. It takes away from actually talking to each other. It takes away from their making good relationships. And I have to tell the faculty, and I've said this in other groups I've talked to, that I have to say that this fall, all of you who were Loyola and had freshmen in your class, or even transfers in your class, or sophomores in your classes, that you did a great job in getting these young people to talk to each other, because you gave them so many group projects to do. I see that from my office in Damon. My door is always open. Besides, I always have a nice window in my dorm, in my office, so that I can see what's happening out and with the students in Damon Student Center. They were constantly doing projects, talking to each other. And as I would go around and say to them, well, have you made new friends? Oh yes, we've made new friends. Or they come into my office, maybe 2 or 3 of them at a time, because they didn't know exactly what a sister was. So they came in out of curiosity. They heard my name. They watched me in the Final Four, but they wanted to come in 2 or 3s. Well, did you all know each other before you came to Loyola? Oh no, met in class, or he lives down the hall from me, or whatever. And I thank the faculty for doing that. These freshmen especially spent most of their high school years online and told me they didn't like it. They were so happy to be in-person classes. Some of them had taken their first exam since 8th grade, their first exam in person as freshmen in college. And that was a shock. I never thought about that until some students told me that. So you've done a great service to them. You've helped them establish relationships. I could see the concern and care for each other that they had by the time they went home at Christmas. And I'm sure their parents saw that when they got home too. You never know what influence you have in a classroom in assigning, for example, group projects. The membership of the projects was very diverse. Now, that could have been by accident, or it could have been done on purpose. Whatever way, it was working. And we do see more diverse groups working together. So I think what you did, and I like to congratulate all of you. So we'll give yourself a little hand clap here. Clap your hands. And thank yourselves. And or if you're in administration and you know your faculty did it, then just continue to do that. So there's so many things where we need to get the balance of what we're doing and what we're saying, what we're reading about, what we believe the future is about. And we need to talk more about the future and how the present is impacting the future. And then how the future is going to impact the present. To me, the present doesn't last very long. We have changes all the time. We have to get used to adapting ourselves, our work, our interest in people. We ourselves have to be communicators. And, you know, it isn't old-fashioned yet to be sending emails. I know texting is, you know, very great favorite among people. I tell the students, don't text me, I don't text. I have too many emails. I have like over 100 every day, every morning when I wake up. Some I have to answer, some I don't have to answer. I said I would never get through texting if I, or reading my emails or answering if I had to text. And I don't read Facebook. I don't have accounts in Twitter. Those if things seem to me what these young people are doing, but I can communicate by email, and they still don't think I'm old-fashioned. So I respect what they think. And another thing is that on my office telephone, I do not have an answering service because I don't want my students leaving messages on the phone. I want them to come in to see me. So they don't get an answer on the phone, they'll have to come in to see me. I try to do little things with them. If I need to make an appointment, well, I should say, first of all, these young people don't like to make appointments. They want to come in when they want to come in, and that's it. So, but if I want them to come in, I give them two choices, and that means they have to answer my email to tell me which one fits with their schedule. Of course, I check their schedule first before I make the choices to be sure that I'm getting them at the right time and not when they're in class. I don't want them to have an excuse. So these little things are, I don't know, just kind of wanting to be more communicative with them. And if they say, oh, I don't know, or I didn't see that, or I didn't know about that, Sister Jean, did you read your email? No. Well, then you're missing out on a lot, because everything seems to be on email today, or whichever way you decide with your class to work with. I just get excited myself when I see so much going on, because I know that the right people will do the right thing, and that you will try to keep a balance of what's happening.
Well, clearly, the rationale for inviting you to come speak today and share with us is that you are pretty digitally savvy. You are 103 years old, and given that you've participated in ethics symposia in the past, what do you find absolutely essential about how we connect, digital or otherwise, and what has you concerned?
Well, I think you have enough workshops. I think you have enough in-house expertise. And sometimes the people within your own house, your own workhouse, I mean, in your own school, your own university, your own people within the university have the expertise that anybody else on the outside the university has. But sometimes we don't listen to the people within. It's like a prophet is not recognized in his own country. So respect those people. And if you have any questions, then you can ask them those questions. It's like, for example, in when I mentioned this different changes that come into our computer every once in a while, and we don't know about it. I've been blaming IT all the time. And Sister Jean, they said, Sister Jean, it's not IT. Oh, well, who's doing it? Well, it's the software company that are doing that. Well, we should have some kind of control over that when they don't know the change. IT doesn't know the changes that are coming in either. Well, IT is a smart group, and so are the students who work there. and they can be of great help to us too. But you have people within your own department, but never hesitate to ask the younger person if you don't know what to do or if you have a problem with it. And that's the only way we're going to learn, and the only way we're going to learn from each other. And that's why we're all here. We're here to learn about it and learn from each other. And those of you who are here today for this workshop, you can listen to me, you can listen to all the next speakers. But you know what? When you go to, I always found out that when I went to a workshop, I learned a lot from the people at the table I was sitting at, or when we were at lunch or dinner together. You learn the practical things then. And you learn practical things from workshops too. But you have to recognize the fact that you have some very good people sitting at your table and who can help you with some of the problems that you might have right now. They'll make it sound very easy for you. And if they make it sound easy, then it must be easy. Or else they'll convince you that it is.
Your perspective is so important, and you get into your history and your perspectives, and I took them as very inspirational, both spiritually and in a technological sense. How do you see the interaction of technology and turning into enhance spiritual life? And what should decision makers apply to the community?
For example, or other places or churches. If we didn't have masses there, then we had them on a YouTube on my iPad. And you would be interested in knowing that I assist Mass every morning in Toronto, Ontario. It's a wonderful experience. The Masses are offered by different priests like Holy Cross Fathers, Jesuit Fathers, Sacred Heart priest. And they're offered in Our Lady of Loretto Chapel in Toronto, which is a very historical building there and houses, invites the people to say Mass there every day. It's just lovely. Nice homily, very nice homilies, last about a half an hour. And it just gets me set for the day. So whether the church will continue that or not, I don't know. But I hope that the church does continue it, especially for the people who are homebound. And there's no way for them to get out to daily Mass or no way for them to get out for Sunday Mass. And this way, they're attending Mass on the Sundays or during the week as they choose. Cardinal Bernardine says, I mean, that was a slip. Cardinal Chupik says Mass every Sunday at 9:30. Wintrust supports the Mass. He still says it So I'm sure he's going to continue it. And so changes may happen in the church. Changes are certainly happening in society. And when I say they're happening in society, I simply mean that we're doing more online kinds of things. A steady diet of online is not good, but some things, distance, saving on transportation, all that kind of saving is very helpful to universities and to people who are participating in workshops or whatever. But whenever you get a chance to attend with your personal presence, do it.
Thank you very much, Sister Jean. I'd like to throw open any questions that you may have for Sister Jean, in person or online. Oh,
Hi, Sister Jean. So for a little bit.
Why don't you go to the microphone so everybody can hear the question?
So for a little bit of context, a couple weeks ago, I was flying back from New England and I had just finished Sister Jean's book. I was telling Dr. Chi about this yesterday. And I was like, I have to go see Sister Jean. I just finished this book. So I walk into her office. I didn't schedule an appointment. I was bad. But she said in her book that, she loves when students walk in. So I go in and there's another boy in there. And my entire time at Loyola, I've only met 2 people from my home state. And we get to talking and he says he's from Portsmouth, New Hampshire. And I go, oh, no way. That's like right next to where I live. Turns out that this boy that was in there was with my cousin the weekend before in Chicago. And we had this whole interaction where we realized this in front of Sister Jean as we were talking about community. And so this was like this moment that kind of stuck with me, Sister Jean, and I've been thinking about it a lot over the past couple of weeks. But I wanted to ask you, as a teacher, how have you handled students not getting along? A lot of times when we have these group projects, students don't really want to work with each other because they don't get along with each other, or people nowadays just don't want to agree with each other. So when you were a teacher and students didn't want to work with each other, what would you say to them to get them to cooperate and collaborate?
I could talk a long time about that. Let me just give you a little history. Thank you. A little history of the writing of the book. When Loyola basketball team went to the Final Four in 2018, and nobody ever forgets that year. It's remarkable how everybody remembers 2018 with but you all had the watch parties while we were there watching everything. And as I tell people, I live those moments over and over again because those young men and the coaches were so happy that we even went to the Final Four. And they said, well, weren't you happy? I mean, you could have been happier if you went to the top. Well, we would have, but we didn't even expect to go to the Final Four. And when we got to the Sweet 16 and they broke my bracket, Clayton Custer said, Sister Jean, we broke your bracket. I said, keep breaking it. Let's keep going. And so that's what they did. But when I think of this at that time, about 6 men called me and asked me to write a book. And I said, oh, I can't be bothered. I said, I have too much to do and I have to take care of the team the way I like to take care of the team. I have all the other students out in the student center and I have to take care of them in my own way. So I just dismissed them. And then it wasn't until about 20 months ago that Seth Davis had talked with our former coach, Porter Mosier. And Porter said to Seth, "You should ask Sister Jean to write a book." Seth is an award-winning college basketball analyst for channel CBS. And so Porter said to him, "I'm going to give you Sister Jean's cell phone number, so give her a call," which he did immediately. And I say to myself, well, he presented it to me the right way, and he was very gentle in the way he presented it. He was pushing me a little. He pushed me more later, but I have to say it was gentle. So I said to him, well, I have to talk to my congregation and to my employer to see if this is okay. So they said, "Go for it, Sister Jean." So Seth came to Loyola, and the first session we had was 5 hours, and that wasn't including lunch. We talked about the book at lunch as well. And in the room with me was Tom Hitchell, who is here with me today, and Bill Behrens. In case I would forget anything, they would kind of prompt me to the fact that I left out something. Seth came back 3 times, 2-3 times later. We talked again. We had countless telephone calls. And as he wrote, he sent us, Bill and Tom and me, he sent us a copy of the manuscript. And he said to me, "Sister Jean, take out your red pen," which I did. I said, "Now, just remember, I was an 8th grade teacher for a long time, and I'm a real grammar expert. So I said, if I see a grammatical error, it's not going to pass." So we put in our comments. He sent back copies again. So that's how we did it all during this process. He made it as easy as possible. We read it 3 times at least, gave our comments. And then the book came out just before March Madness began. They gave it to, the printer gave it to Amazon and to Barnes and Noble to be the distributors. Amazon tells us they sold 6,000 copies in 2 days. We're number 1 in Amazon. And I didn't look at the New York Times today, but we were 11, then 9, and then 7. So I don't say that just because I'm sitting up here, but it's a team, and Seth called it the Team Jean, so that we had the printer and the publisher and the reader and all these people involved, plus the people from Loyola who had read it and made comments on it. It was not as difficult as I thought. Perhaps I've given more time to interviews. I did at least 25 interviews, including our local channels, ESPN, all those wonderful places, a number of religious radio shows, radio channels, The other day I did BBC. I did a rabbi and sidelines. I've just had wonderful time, just a lot of fun. So if you want to have your book printed, ask Seth to do it with you. I'm not working up business for him because he has a lot of business. But I think having somebody like that I did the talking, he did the writing. And that was very important. And there were other little processes we had to do in between, but
I have a solo book coming out in May, and I totally wish I had someone with me, so I totally get it. We have a question from online, from Professor Arun Raja in the School of Communication. Thank you for your time, Sister Jean. As an educator, I'm noticing how current students are feeling despondent and disengaged with the current polycrises they're facing, especially considering they have spent the lion's share of their college years grappling with pandemic society. Could you perhaps offer some advice on some strategies educators can use in the classroom to help students cope with the sense of hopelessness and despondency?
well, I think one of the things I mentioned was the group projects, because I think group projects brings out the best in every student. And as I walked around in Damon and said to them, well, what's a group project all about and so forth, and I said, is everybody in this project doing his and her job? You can't have anybody sloughing off. You have to make everybody be responsible, because both you out here and I know that some students might want to just be hangers on to the group and let everybody else do the work. No more of that. Everybody has to take part. Also, if a student or a faculty member sees that the student is not working up to capacity, or just doesn't seem to pay attention, or whatever it is, or seems tired, recommend to the student that he or she go to wellness center. Wellness center, both down here at Water Tower and at Lake Shore. Those people are so trained, and if they can't do the job, they outsource. So our students have every possibility of returning to where they belong. Sometimes they may seem it might be a result of COVID, but maybe it's just because they're not catching up on their work. Or maybe their parents are going through a divorce, and that is a very difficult thing for them. People at one time said, oh, college students don't pay any attention to that. They do. It's very serious for them, especially at holiday time and summertime. They don't know whether to go with the father or the mother. And if there's another marriage in there, it makes it even more complicated for them. You have to gain their trust so that they will talk to you about it. And otherwise, just recommend that they go see somebody else. And while you're there, just pick up the phone and call that person and say you're sending them. Now, I had that wonderful experience once with a young man from down here who was in the School of Continuing Professional Studies. And he came in to me and he was opening up and he was telling me things that he shouldn't have been telling me. And so I said, you know, I think you need to be talking to a Jesuit. And he said, oh, Sister Jean, aren't you a Jesuit? And I said, no, I'm really not. I'm a BVM sister. But I said, I know a Jesuit who will be very happy to talk to you. So I picked up the phone and called one of the Jesuits down here. And I said, that was Father Krupa from Pastoral Studies. And I said, could you see somebody now? And he said, sounds like emergency. And I said, sort of. He said, sure. He said, send them over. Well, it was a very cold winter day. So I put my coat on, put my boots on. And he said, oh, Sister Jean, are you coming with me? And I said, well, I'm going to show you where he is because you don't even know the name of the building. You haven't been here that long. And I'm just going to walk to that building with you into his office. And so we started out, and then at that time we had that little market there, 8:20. So he said, I didn't have lunch. I think I'll go in and get a sandwich. So I went in with him and he said, are you coming in with me? And I said, do you think I'm going to stand out here in the cold? I was afraid he'd go out the back door. That's why I went in with him, really. So we came over here and Father Krupa was waiting for us. And then Father Krupa called me afterward and he said, I can't believe you walked over with that guy in such a horrible day. And I said, I was afraid he wouldn't find you and that he would just have an excuse to say that and he wouldn't see you. Father Krupa continued to see him, and that young man was all fine. So it gets the right person to the right person, and then we'll be okay. So I suggest you do that. If the case is bad or he thinks it is, then send him over to the wellness center, and the people there will take care of it.
Well, Sister Jean is definitely emblematic of a person for others in how you have shared with us through text and also with your presence and how you connect so many people. You are better than connecting online. Everyone seems to connect through you as a central hub. And it is really good advice that we can, in that sense, engage in that pastoral care and metaphorically or literally walk with that person to get help when they're in need. If there are no other questions in the audience, we can let Sister Jean say her. We can let her off the hook, hot seat, and we can take this offline and relax a bit.
Well, I think if they read my book too, you'll find that I've really opened up to you. And those of you who have read it have told me that. I've had very nice letters from people, but it talks about my life in the elementary school, talks about my life at Mundelein, at Loyola. And if you have any questions after you leave all this and say, oh, she didn't answer that question or whatever, send me an email. You can get my email address from Dr. Chi, and that'd be fine. I'll answer it.
Thank you so much, Sister Jean. Please.